in just one more minute. We've got a bunch of people joining up as we speak, so we're going to give another 60 seconds to get joined, and then we'll begin the webinar today. Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending upon what part of the world you're in. My name's Tim Brayman. I'm head of corporate strategy for Revigy, and I'm the person responsible for vision direction of our portfolio of solutions. I am privileged I say, to have with me today Mr. Mark Lindwall, senior analyst from Forrester. Say hi, Mark.
Hi, everyone.
Mark and I have worked together as we're a client of Forrester, and Mark is he's the smartest guy in the room today, frankly. And so he serves sales enablement professionals, and he's basically a longtime subject matter expert on sales management and sales force development. And he does research into topics on sales process, sales tools, and people development for effective B2B sales. So just a reminder, everybody's on mute right now. There's a question box in the GoToWebinar control panel, so if you have questions as we're going along, feel free to type those questions in, and at the tail end, we'll get around to letting Mark answer those questions. So anyway, Mark, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn over what I think is actually one of my very favorite topics to talk about, which is building strategic relationships with our most important customers. So Mark, would you go ahead and launch in and get us started?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone, again. So on Forrester's sales enablement team, one of the interesting things that I'm researching right now is about how companies have to adapt their sales force development in this new economy that we're working in since 2008. So again, I'm here to talk about those adaptations in regard to strategic account selling. So we're going to discuss the current state of strategic accounts today. I think you're going to be really surprised by some of the things that you learn early on in this presentation. And then we're going to get into really the meat of this, which is what companies like yours need to do to be successful if you decide to invest in or continue to invest in strategic accounts. So let's dive in. CEOs, chief marketing officers, chief sales officers, or VPs of sales have been investing in strategic account programs for a whole bunch of years, and there's no evidence to suggest that this is slowing down. Frankly, the potential revenue that's represented by these large accounts, or large accounts such as the ones that you see on the screen, is really just too tempting not to focus resources on. Companies have different names for these kinds of programs. Global accounts, premier accounts, platinum accounts, major accounts, but really what we're talking about is a scenario in which a salesperson is assigned to just one or a very few accounts with the intention of really focusing their effort to grow the revenues in that account or those couple of accounts. So that inherently then elevates the level of investment that's going on with those particular accounts. So I would ask the question, is a strategic accounts program a good investment? Well, it really depends upon its execution. If we just looked at the fact that buyers say that they spend more money with strategic providers, then yes, it would be a good investment. Like 91% of the executive buyers that we survey say that their companies spend more money with strategic providers than with other vendors. And by the way, 79% of salespeople agree with that.
Hey, Mark.
So, yeah.
Can I jump in for just a second? Because that's
yes,
just
please.
such a crucial point. One of the things that I also am a member of is the Strategic Account Management Association. And, they're an industry not-for-profit around strategic accounts. And the Pareto rule really applies here, right? Your top 20% of your customers are probably generating 60 to 80% of your revenue. As a matter of fact, we have one customer where 15 customers of theirs are almost 90% of their revenue. But in addition to the fact that they spend more, the really cool thing that I saw in the most recent SAMA survey is not only do they spend more with their strategic providers, but the year-over-year revenue growth rate is higher. They're actually accelerating their spend with those strategic providers at a much higher rate than they are with their other vendors, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing to add to that.
Yeah, and I think thanks, Tim. That's a great point, and I think that's specifically tuned into the fact that executive buyers are really looking for and value relationships with organizations that can help them solve big problems and find big opportunities that are within their organization or within their markets. So let me continue with this thread. While this revenue metric is really important, well, why else would companies invest in a strategic account program? The fact is, strategic providers get some pretty serious competitive advantage. According to our research on sourcing professionals who are involved in segmenting their vendors, the #1 advantage that companies provide to their strategic vendors is more frequent access to their executives than lower tier vendors get. So, while there are some other advantages that you'll see on this chart, including, by the way, preferential treatment during product selection, and you'll see that linkage here in just a minute, access to executives is clearly the most important benefit that strategic vendors get, and here's why. The fact is that for the past 6 years, we've surveyed and interviewed hundreds of executive buyers around the world, and they tell us that when a vendor gets involved very early in their decision process, I'm talking about helping them to understand the nature of a problem, helping them to identify that they even have a problem, helping them to identify what are the implications of that problem within their organization. This is all well before product discussions ever come up. When those vendors get involved very early in that decision process, that provider has better than a 72% likelihood to win that business. And when that access is at the C level, or think about that as the executive committee level, that win probability goes up to 82%. So what's important there is to remember that this is according to the executive buyers themselves, right? That's who's saying they award business to those vendors that get involved early. So, on the other hand, if you look at the right-hand side of this chart on the bottom, the competitors who get involved in the decision process when actual products or solutions are being evaluated or sought, they've got less than a 30% chance of winning. And they get the lowest level of support from the executive suite. So getting more access and more frequent access to executive buyers is a massive competitive advantage that strategic providers get.
Yeah, this makes just a ton of sense to me, Mark. I mean, you're really putting numbers to something I think that we've all known for quite a while. And I'm not going to get into religious warfare over which sales methodology is better, but I don't think it makes any difference whether you call it insight selling from the folks at Challenger, or whether you roll back 5 years and look at the Harvard Business Review talking about provocative selling, or whether you roll back 20 years to when the solution selling guys were talking about solving latent pains.
Right.
It's always been true that when you get in early and create the vision for the customer, that you've got a higher propensity to win. And I think with the new economy and what's been going on with regard to how executives buy and how companies buy, those numbers have gotten even sharper, as your research points out.
Right. And by the way, I want to be clear on something. When I said that vendors that are designated as strategic providers by their customers get more frequent access to executives, what I want to be sure that is coming across loud and clear is that executives are the ones that determine whether you are a strategic provider or not, okay? Not you. Just because your company or a company designates a customer as a strategic account does not open up the revenue spigot, does not institute the advantages that we just talked to. Because while your company may want to be a strategic provider, the reality is only the customer can designate you as this, and becoming one is getting increasingly difficult. Does that make sense, Tim?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've seen this all the time. I mean, we see companies who say, wow, we look at this one particular customer, and they're one of our top 5 customers. We clearly need to look at them as a strategic partner. And then you look at it from the other perspective, from the customer's eyes. I'm reminded of a situation a long time ago with a software company called Computer Associates. And I was working with their CIO, and I was talking to him about, who are your strategic partners? And, he rattled off this list, and he said, and he made this comment that the local phone company would come to him and say, hey, you're our strategic partner. And even though they spent an enormous amount of money with the local phone company that also provided internet service, CA didn't look at them as a strategic partner. So it was, that fundamental disconnect there can cause all kinds of headaches and can cause, frankly, people to spin their wheels on the strategic account side when you declare somebody who doesn't want to be a strategic partner to declare them as your partner.
Yeah, great point. And I think attached to that, or I'll append to that, so a lot of times when these designations are made by vendor organizations, by sales management, let's say, it's based upon the revenue that's being generated. And so while the phone company may have had a huge amount of revenue coming out of CA, that again does not mean that they were a strategic provider, though they may looked at that revenue and said, absolutely, CA is a strategic account of ours. So
Yep.
I think as sales leaders, we've really got to look at how we determine whether or not accounts are strategic accounts or not.
Yep.
So look at this, because this is, I think, really interesting. When we surveyed sourcing and vendor management professionals about their strategic providers, 3/4 of them said that no more than 20 of their vendors earn strategic status. Think about that. Think about the fact that many of these companies have thousands of suppliers. So the odds of getting designated or deemed a strategic provider by executive buyers is extremely small, extremely small.
Yeah, that was one of the statistics that really rocked me when I saw you first put that one together, Mark.
Yeah, and here's another really interesting set of data for you to think about. How well are we aligning? How well are we helping our salespeople understand what a strategic account really is, what a strategic relationship is? Forrester found in our research that there is a massive amount of delusion among salespeople in regard to how strategically valuable they think they are to their customers. So while we just talked through the small number of vendors that actually earn designations of strategic providers, salespeople, well, actually our survey was of North American technology sellers, so I should call that out. But salespeople virtually all believe that the majority of their customers consider them to be strategic providers. I mean, this blew me away. So, just starting from the top, 80% of inside reps surveyed think that more than half of their customers consider them to be a strategic provider. 86% of geographic territory reps think that more than half of their customers see them as a strategic provider. And hey, salespeople's perceptions are just a product of their training and experiences, right? But here's the most important finding out of this, and I need to click this for you, bring this up. Only 12% of strategic account reps said that all of their customers, all of them, consider them to be strategic providers. Okay, so 77%, over 3/4, said that more than half of their accounts considered them to be strategic. But here's my question: if customers were involved in the process of deciding whether they were going to invest in being a strategic account, then wouldn't we expect that 100%, or at least close to 100% of a strategic rep's accounts would consider them to be strategic? I mean, isn't that telling of how disconnected we really are with our customers in terms of what a strategic relationship really is?
Mark, that's a crucial point, but it's, it kind of reminds me of a book that I read a while back that David Maister did on the trusted advisor.
Yeah,
and I think perhaps it's a language issue, right? Because you can have a trusted advisor relationship as a salesperson with someone or a couple of someones at your customer, right? So if you sell security software, you may be the trusted advisor for the VP of data security. I mean, that's a legitimate thing. But if you're talking to the VP of data security at Citicorp, some enormous global corporation, that doesn't necessarily mean that Citicorp perceives your company as a strategic partner. You've built that
Right.
trusted advisor relationship with some people, which is a great thing. I mean, I'm not denigrating that in any way. Those are great relationships, crucial to being effective as a salesperson, and they're highly valuable. As a matter of fact, I might say that they're great starting points for embarking on creating a strategic partnership. But you can't just declare, hey, the VP of security says I'm a strategic partner, so therefore our company is.
Yeah. Well, and back to my comment about how strategic accounts are designated, these are some of the dynamics that happen in a lot of companies. Is the VP of sales has a discussion with the management team about which of the accounts they should really invest in, and the reps are asked, who do we have great relationships with, and where are the where's the largest amount of revenue and or revenue potential. And so that discussion of relationship is answered by, hey, we have a great relationship. But as you're going to see in a few minutes, the nature, the complexity of relationships has changed tremendously.
Yep.
So let me so that's kind of an overview of the world of strategic accounts today. Well, no, I want to give one more bit of insight here, and that is, these are some of the frustrations that I hear and that we hear from sales leaders regarding their strategic accounts programs. So, these are a lot of the same challenges. I think you'll see that there are a lot of the same challenges that are happening in non-strategic accounts. So, does this sound like the customer has designated the vendor as a strategic provider and given them, frequent access to executives that access that you now know goes along with being designated as a strategic provider?
Yeah, not so much.
Look at the implications. Do these sound like customers have designated these vendors as strategic? I mean, look at the issue of limited access to customer executives. and look down at the bottom at win rates and increased chance of discounting. Well, you know, we shared that when strategic providers are granted early access, they've got a massively higher win rate. But by the way, margins are way higher in those wins as well, because, you know, there are executives that are saying, hey, this is the provider that we want. So just back to the original question. When chief executives, heads of marketing, heads of sales invest in strategic account programs, is it a good investment? Well, not unless we optimize these programs. Okay, that said, we have to look at the fact that some strategic providers do earn a lot more spending, and they clearly get competitive advantages. So the right strategic account programs are potentially a good investment. But you know, these are big investments, and we really have to look closely at whether we're doing the right things. So let's dig into what that looks like.
All right, bring us the aspirin to this pain.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, from a Forrester standpoint, we talk about this as being the age of the customer, right? The customer has far more power over whether they work with you, what they buy, what they, you know, buyers have the power today. And so we've got to design all of our sales and marketing programs from the buyers back. I'm not talking about a customer, by the way. I'm talking about specific buyers that we work with. And executive buyers tell us that what they find valuable in meeting with salespeople is when reps help them to solve problems. Okay, all three of these responses to how, you know, what do they find valuable, go to the issue of, I want somebody to come in and help me figure out what our problem is, or what we have, or what is an opportunity or a risk that's coming over the horizon that we haven't even seen, or, you know, to your comment, Tim, about latent pain to pain and solution selling, right? It's about, you know, if I know that I have a challenge but I don't know how to figure it out, I need help. So this is what executive buyers want. You know, almost all sales management and sales leaders want their salespeople to be calling higher. This is the recipe. You know, equipping your salespeople to be able to do this is the recipe for opening the doors. So unfortunately, it doesn't really happen a whole lot, right? Most salespeople, including strategic account reps, just aren't well prepared by their organizations to create that value, that problem-solving value when they meet with executive buyers, and instead are trained and equipped to present products rather than solving problems. And so, you know, according to executive buyers, that's a seller's agenda when they meet with these buyers. And so if you look at the right-hand side, this 20% of sellers who come in to meet with executives are perceived by the executives as actually truly being focused on helping them to solve a business problem. Everybody else, the other 80% of reps, are perceived by executive buyers, and by the way, I'm talking about director, VP, and C-level buyers. They're all perceived as being focused on an agenda of selling their product. And by the way, you know, these buyers are perfectly happy to buy stuff, whatever that stuff may be, as long as it's helping them to solve the problem, and that's what they're focused on. They don't care about products. They care about solving their issues. So what happens? Yes?
You know, that just kind of, when you just said that reminded me of some of the behaviors that I've seen is, you know, we kind of push a lot of our sellers into this role because you bring them on board, you hire somebody, and what's the first thing you do is you put them through product training.
Yeah,
right? We train them on the products. And we may spend 3/4 of our training budget on training them on our product, as opposed to training them on the problems that we solve and the value that our customers get from them. I really wish we'd flip that equation in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually researching onboarding right now, and you're absolutely right that that is almost inevitably the pure focus of onboarding and training. It is a product orientation, and quite frankly, we think it ought to be flipped, right? We think that the first thing we should do is teach your salespeople who are the buyers that they're going to be calling on. What are their business challenges? What business are they in? What are their roles and responsibility? How is their world changing? You know, all of those elements to help them understand those buyers and have empathy. And then, secondarily, teach them your products, right? And I've got just tons of examples of reps who are very successful, even though they don't really know their products that well, but they know their buyers.
Yep.
So, you know, the result of salespeople coming in and pitching products to people to executive buyers who want to solve problems is that only about 1 out of 4 of those reps actually gets another meeting. So think about that, right? I mean, think about how hard it is for salespeople to even get the door open. Think about how much money gets spent by marketing organizations to open a door to a conversation for a salesperson, and 75% of those opportunities just get flushed because reps have been taught, and look, I'm a sales guy, right? My whole career has been in sales. I am not pointing the finger at salespeople. They are a product of how they've been trained and equipped. But the reality is we've got to change this, because when 75% of our meetings end up in a dead sale, something's wrong. And the something that's wrong is that we are talking about products instead of helping those executive buyers to solve problems. I should step back for a second too, right? This whole discussion today is about strategic accounts. I know that there are products that are being purchased by procurement people that, you know, those procurement people just want rapid turnaround. They want to talk about products. That's fine. That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about strategic relationships with organizations.
Yeah.
So we've got to get salespeople focused on helping executive buyers succeed. And we also have to help them understand how to navigate complexity that has grown immensely in large accounts. So let's look at how the buying and selling environment has tectonically shifted over the last 5 years, largely due to the change in the economy that I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion. So here we have a typical view of a buyer and a seller. It's a one-to-one selling opportunity. Most sales training for the past 100+ years has been oriented around this selling dynamic. Taking a step further, we have a one-on-one sales meeting with different buyers within an organization, right? So now we're saying, okay, so we've got products that we want to sell. Those could be bought by a manager or a VP or whomever it might be. So we go and we train our reps to go out and find that person that has budget, authority, need, and a defined timeline, right? BANT is the acronym for that. So this is how selling, again, has been done for eons. But as BANT is looking for existing budget and authority, a person with authority and a person with need, and a defined timeline still relevant for salespeople, especially in strategic accounts. You know, is this how buying and selling is really happening in large companies? I'm here to tell you that it's not, okay? It has changed profoundly. Here's what is happening. What we observe is that buying has gotten incredibly complex, but we haven't prepared salespeople for this shift. Today, Selling involves multiple sales within one sale. Selling has become far more expensive as a result, by the way, because we're calling on way more many people, and it's and selling has far more risk associated with it because decisions are being made by groups of decision makers as opposed to that one buyer who had authority. You know, it's unusual for any one buyer today to have budget or budget authority, even at an executive level. You know, CIOs used to have millions of dollars, sometimes tens of millions of dollars of budget authority. They could make the call. Today, Today, budget has to be funded by multiple wallet holders within that organization, and they have to agree to contribute funding. So that means that there's a lot of internal selling going on that's often unsuccessful between one executive trying to convince other executives to contribute budget because they don't have enough budget on their own. They've got to go and get it pooled. So think about that. How many of your customers are really great salespeople or even know how to sell or persuade internally?
You know, and this, Mark, this is I've got a great story that really exemplifies this, that a friend of mine told me, and it was he's the CFO of a soda pop manufacturer over in Europe, and the CIO came to him and said, hey, we're going to go and purchase this technology from this technology vendor. And the technology vendor done a fabulous job, and this was a contract worth tens of millions of dollars. It had been in process for almost 2 years. The CIO had included the purchase of this technology in his budget, and they were down to the 11th hour. Everything was done, the proof of concept all done, but in their business process, the CFO has to sign off on each major purchase like this. And so even though it was in the budget, the CIO walks into the CFO's office and says, hey, you know, here's this deal we've been talking about. It's in my budget. We're buying this technology. You know, would you go ahead and sign off on it? And the CFO tells this story to me and a couple other people in the room. Said he looked at the CIO and said, how does this help me sell more soda pop? And the CIO was unable to answer the question. And you know what happens here, you know, this is where the large ship sinks. You know, so when you've got a contract in excess of $10 million that all of a sudden everybody thinks is done deal and it doesn't get done, you know, that's
Right.
a very painful conversation to have with senior executives in your technology company.
Right, right. Yeah, and I'm, you know, that was forecasted business, right? So.
Oh yeah, that was a guarantee. That was the one that they said this is a lock. We're committing in
Right.
blood to this deal.
Right. Yeah, great example. So, I mean, that's happening everywhere, right? It's just the whole, again, the whole idea that budget and authority, when I say the whole idea, the whole dynamic of budget and authority has fundamentally shifted. You know, look, I've been through strategic selling, you know, the best strategic selling programs training-wise in my career as a rep and a manager. They helped me be very successful. That what is occurring today is way beyond what reps have learned to cope with in terms of this complexity. You know, and so I'll just go through it again. Budget, it's all over. It has to be pooled. Authority, there's no one person that has authority to pull the trigger. Many people have to agree. Need, well, many people have to agree that they have the need. And from a timeline perspective, back up to the image that I showed you of you know, getting involved early in the decision cycle. Well, you know, if we're looking, if timelines on some of these deals may be months, quarters, years. If we're getting involved really early in that decision process. So, you know, we have to fundamentally rethink how we're working with organizations. So, just real quickly, you know, so we talk in terms of agreement networks that happen within companies. These networks vary in complexity from a small network of buyers that are buying similar offerings across different business units or functions, and they want to consider consolidating budget to get a better price or more service leverage. You may have an agreement network that of a leader or leaders of a business function or functions who need to solve a process or a workflow problem, and that workflow problem may more than likely extend over into other business functions. So so again, the budgeting needs to come from all of those people who are being affected by that particular process, and there are a lot of people that have to get on board with whether or not this is a need and whether or not this is the right solution, and whether they'll fund it. The most complex network is the executive committee level agreement network. Okay, and these are the ones in a strategic account program that are necessary to engage with in order to really develop those high-level, long-term strategic relationships. So we're talking about cross-organization, cross-functional relationships up and down the organization. So there's a lot of work to do to help strategic account reps understand these new buying dynamics. So if we want to succeed in strategic selling, we need to move from seeking that one buyer sponsor. I think I probably beat this to death now, but we've got to get into the mode of training reps and helping and equipping them to look through a different lens at how to move them from this environment to being able to sell, being able to understand and sell in complex networks where funding is sourced by multiple people within the organization. So let's look at this from a strategic account planning standpoint, because I think this is crucial to whether or not we're really doing strategic accounts or not, right? We can designate an account as a strategic account and just have a rep go and find opportunities by trying to find that person that's got budget. But if we're really talking about strategic accounts, then that is a long-term vision where we're getting on board with a client for a journey of some sort. So to create positive yield out of these investments, the execution, and I said, this is all about execution of strategic account programs. The execution at most companies has to change. And that starts with only designating customers as strategic accounts when the executives from both companies formally agree to mutually invest resources in the relationship. Only then should we be calling it a strategic account, because otherwise we're just calling it a strategic account and the other company sees us as a vendor. Until customers say that you're a strategic provider, calling them a strategic account just really undermines the success of your overall strategic account program, just erodes the confidence across the organization. So account planning for strategic accounts is not a unilateral activity. You don't send your account team to figure out what are we going to sell to them. It's a shared exercise between the executive level of a strategic account and the strategic account manager and other resources within their company, right? Probably executives. And it's that account manager that's got to identify and engage the executives and the resources to determine, to create that mutual recognition of value, and to plan that out. So so think about then so that's the strategic level. Now when we get into actually executing over the course of a year or 2 years, what will happen is we're going to have agreement networks forming around particular decisions, and those agreement networks will form formally or informally. They will make decisions, and they'll fade away. And then on another decision, a new agreement network will evolve with new players for different issues. So let's look at who gets involved and how we handle that from an account management standpoint. So this is what we call our value perception matrix. What's important for you to recognize is that the two axes are about complexity, right, on the vertical axis, and on the horizontal or x-axis, it's about the value that's recognized by a buyer or a set of buyers in the knowledge that's transferred from a vendor organization to the customer, right? So in other words, it's about insights. How much value is there in the insights that are being provided? So on the left-hand side of this matrix, buyers largely already understand what they want and what they need, and they're just trying to determine who are they going to buy it from and what price are they going to get it at. The left-hand side of this is not the kind of relationships that should be considered strategic. So I'm going back now to your CA example, Tim. That relationship with the phone company was a high dollar, probably relatively high complexity relationship, was probably in the top left of this matrix, drove a lot of revenue, but it's not really a strategic relationship. So let's think about the account team, where they need to focus. The strategic account managers they've got the highest level responsibility to bring insights and resources to this customer. They've got to coordinate planning between an account team and the executives of both organizations. And that account manager requires a high level of investment if you're going to make this work. They've got to have executive skills. They've got to be able to lead. They've got to have financial aptitude. They've got to be able to understand projects and program management. But they don't have to have all of the technical skills. They're going to bring in specialists. So when we find particular opportunities, then we'll bring in somebody that can bring in that knowledge transfer, that expertise on how to diagnose and prescribe a solution to a problem. And again, I want to point out that these, especially in the lower right-hand corner here, those agreement networks are going to change all the time depending upon what it is that they're trying to solve. Then back up to the left-hand side, I've already said this is not the space. If we're going to be investing in strategic account programs, I don't care what the revenue level is. These are procurement type or strategic sourcing type purchasing arrangements, and it is a low margin, high volume, left side, top left, low margin, low volume purchasing arrangement. It's not the place to invest. Where we should be investing is in solving problems with executives. So let's just talk through very quickly engaging with these strategic accounts, and go one last step and just talk about what your teams need to accomplish with these customers and what resources they need in order to execute. So these are just four basic binary steps. I don't care, we have clients who have 400 steps in their sales process, truly. But these are four that have to happen to advance a sale. So all I want to do just very rapidly is just show you, the difference that you've got to consider in that box on the top left, the traditional, one-on-one selling environment, to the complexity of the right-hand side. Think about all of the people that we have to gain access to, and the kinds of different messages that each of those people that you see in that top right box have to be able to receive, right? We've got technical people, we've got financial people, we've got operational people. Our salespeople have to be able to carry the day with each one of them in gaining access, and if we don't gain access, our risk goes up. Same thing with having successful meetings. Think of how different meeting with a CIO is than a CEO, than a CFO, than a director of digital intelligence, our sales, whoever our salespeople need to meet with, we've got to prepare them to be able to have relevant conversations that help move the ball forward. And in terms of creating a shared vision of success, well, this is all about collaborating with customers on their challenges, right? This gets right to the heart of working with them early in the process and getting clear alignment about what the problem is, what do they want to accomplish, who are the roles and responsibilities that are involved, and what is the prescription that's going to help them get there. So lastly, developing a business case, right? Completely different business cases depending upon, from the left-hand side, which was a simple proposal, to the right-hand side, which is about, being able to speak, again, at different altitudes, creating business cases that help our buyers sell internally, and speaking at a business level, oftentimes a financial level. So,
Mark,
yes.
let me jump in here for just a second, because this is so crucial. That those 4 objectives of sales, they apply both to an individual strategic sale, right? So if you're selling a big deal to a customer or any deal, you need to gain access, you have a good, successful meeting, share a vision of success, and develop a business case. But this is also so crucial at a higher level, right, when you're talking about building strategic account relationships, because you're talking about building a shared vision of success of how we're going to work together over the next 2 to 3 to 5 years. And you're talking about developing a business case for the partnership, not for a specific deal, and why it's going to be valuable for us to collaborate together, where, the old axiom, 1 + 1 = 3. That's what we're doing here in strategic account relationships. So I love the fact that these 4 objectives apply both at the deal level, but also if you bring them up a level, it's still the same key objectives, just at a higher level of complexity. I mean, I tell everybody all the time that, we're in a high-rise building here in Atlanta, 20 stories, and there's these guys who ride up and down in the elevators walking in trying to sell phone systems. They knock on the door, walk in the office, wander around going, hey, would you like to buy a phone system?
Right.
Those guys still, they're still trying to gain access and have a successful meeting and share a vision, but their world is radically different, from the guy, who's trying to sell nuclear power plants into Japan. I mean, it's the same,
Amen.
broad brush steps and pieces, but the level of complexity and the level of knowledge transfer and the level you've got to be able to talk to is just so much higher when you get to the strategic account relationships.
Yeah, great point. Thank you. Yeah, so that, I mean, this pretty much wraps up what I wanted to talk about, and hopefully you can see that if you're going to invest in strategic accounts and of course expect a good return from that, then you better make sure that your resources are aligned to help your reps be really good at engaging with executives in strategic accounts and helping them to solve problems early in their decision process. And that's not easy, right? It takes an organizational commitment to figure out even what those insights are, much less, training reps to deliver those messages and staying relevant. But and by the way, you should ask yourself whether your company even has the offerings or the resources to become a top-tier provider. Because if you don't, then I would ask, is it even wise for you to invest in strategic accounts? And assuming you're all in, you got to start engaging customers in that designation as to whether your company is a strategic provider. If they're not willing, then it's really better to just reassign accounts to lower cost geographic or major account reps, and it's okay. In fact, it's great to have just a few genuine strategic accounts if you're going to go that route. But then just for the strategic accounts that you keep, strive to understand what's working and duplicate that to expand if that makes sense. So Tim, I think that you had something that you wanted to add to this as well.
Well, yeah, so what I did is I'm a very practical person. And so what I did is I took those 4 bullet points that you had there and added 4 slides to the end to talk about some pictures here. So if you would slide forward to the next slide.
I am working on that presently. Sorry about that.
No worries. You know, always hard to operate that PowerPoint technology.
It's tough. I have no idea how I ended up way back here, to be honest with you, but I did, so I'm going to do the fast. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to do this is a moment of panic. If you could see me, you would see me blushing right now.
Yeah. Well, as you scroll forward, I'll talk about the 4 points until you actually get to the pictures that we talked about, which is, you know, first off, designate strategic accounts. Right, you know, that's crucial. So that's segmentation and determining who are the key customers that you want to work with, and then, you know, visually mapping out your key relationships. Right. So okay, there's the picture I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So this is a tool that everybody should use. It's actually a piece of our technology, but you can do this with PowerPoint. You know, Mark, when you're talking about building that network, right, for strategic relationship management, you know, all the industry surveys say there's between 4.5 and 5.5 decision makers in a sales decision. Well, guess what? If I'm going to build a long-term strategic relationship, if you go back to SAMA, they say you really need 10 to 12 senior-level relationships. And so what you need to do is you need to map out with your team for these strategic accounts, who do you have relationships with, and where will you need them in the future as these agreement networks, you know, arise and move around for each subsequent opportunity. So, you know, salespeople are highly visual. Build out that visual map of your strategic account and figure out where do we need the relationships. And then if you'll roll forward to the next one, you know, look at it on a couple of different axes, right? So, you know, on the vertical axis, we're talking about from the professional level up to the C-level, where are your relationships? And then in what business units, right? One of the most effective things in strategic account relationships is getting not just higher, but getting wider, getting into additional business functions and business units. So make sure you can leverage that information about those, you know, where do you have the relationships for each account, and figure out where do we need to be building relationships because we've got deficiencies.
Yeah.
And
that color coding, by the way, Tim?
The color coding, you know, the dark green are the people who are very friendly. We've got strong relationships, see the value in us. The red being those places where either we've got no relationships or they don't like us, right? So I'm a big fan of, you know, red light, green light. You know, make it really easy to people figure out where's the danger and the hot zones, and where do we have success. Yeah.
So when you think about that agreement network, right? To me, this is a risk chart. Because if we're not engaging with those wallet owners and those particular all of the people that are involved in that sale and influencing it or deciding whether to contribute funding to it, then our risk just dramatically goes up. And by the way, so does our cost, right? Because
exactly.
We can sell all day, but if we don't actually contract, then it's just cost.
Then we've got no business. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Do you want me to advance here?
Yeah, if you would. And then, you know, take that information related to individual accounts and then look at your portfolio of strategic accounts, you know, of the really important customers that you have. And, you know, this is just another analytic where we're looking at relationship and strength of relationship from poor at the bottom to very strong at the top. Obviously looking at the relationship from the customer's eyes. And then left to right looking at how much revenue, how important are they from a revenue perspective to us. So, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, take the information that you've got in those strategic account plans and leverage that to make investment decisions across where do you invest. And the question is in the bottom right, you know, if those customers, we've got very poor relationships, we're investing heavily, are they worth the investment, I think is kind of the terminology you used earlier, Mark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the last thing related to this, and this is my favorite point in planning, and that is you've got to build a plan. And there's two crucial things, one that I'll add, Mark, and one that you already added. One is I'm a big fan of SMART objectives. You know, it's great to walk out of an account planning session with a long list of things to do, but what were the objectives and goals for those activities, right? And are they measurable? You know, specific, measurable, achievable, reasonable, and time-bound is the SMART acronym, right? So do we actually, you know, there's a huge difference between activity and progress, is one of my mentors used to say. So I'm a big fan of building plans around how do we get higher and wider with the relationship, but I'm also a big fan of adding other dimensions to your account plan, such as what's your customer success goal, right? You may declare as a vendor selling $5, $10, $50 million to one of your customers. That may be success for you. But where is your customer in the account plan? What would they declare success? So,
Exactly.
you know, in addition to the relationship, Mark, I'm a big fan of looking at it from the customer's perspective. How would they declare this success?
Right. Yeah, that's to the whole point of collaborating on deciding whether, you know, mutually deciding whether they are going to be a strategic account, whether you are a strategic vendor in their eyes, and then, you know, everything's about collaboration at that point.
Yeah. So Mark, we've got time for one question that popped up here. Actually, there's a couple. We'll respond by email to all the questions, but there's one that I really liked, and that is, you talked about strategic accounts, you know, as that bilateral vision, right? It's the customer perceives us as strategic, and we perceive them as strategic. What kind of investments do you still have to do a lot of the things we talked about here today with just really big customer? You know, they're a very big customer, they spend a lot of money with us, but they don't perceive us as strategic. Do we still invest to a certain amount? Do we mark them up as an aspirational strategic account? What's your advice there?
Yeah, so there, you know, a lot of what I've talked about is frankly applicable to a lot of the accounts that you might work with, right? I do have a bit of religion around you know, this definition of strategic accounts, whatever you call it. You know, tier your own accounts so that you make a decision as to, for those very top level accounts, those are the ones that you're going to put the most investment in, your own executive time, their executive time, and so yeah, I like that idea of an aspirational account. You know, you maybe move them down one tier to somebody who's got 3 or 4 or 5 accounts, and you put in and you use those lessons learned about what works in the strategic accounts, and you build towards developing them into a strategic account, if that makes sense.
Okay, that does make sense to me, and I wholeheartedly agree. And not just because you're such a great guy and really smart. So Mark, that actually brings us to the end of our time together. I want to say thank you very much for all your help and insights here. And folks, Mark's contact information is there if you have further questions. And if you are, we'll be sending out a replay to everybody who participated, so you'll get a chance to share this with others. I wish everyone a great and successful rest of the weekend. Have a great day. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for participating. Thank you.